automobile off-street parking spaces are an unfunded mandate. So that argument, I don't think holds water with me, because if we didn't require off-street parking, it would be a problem. I think one of the reasons why people don't use bike racks is it's not the kind of racks that would properly support their bikes. I think the city should lead the way in the downtown central business district, either by taking a automobile parking space and converting it, or using that inventory of spaces that you recommended, that you talked about, Tim. And I think we should use the public art funding money to put up some demonstration bike lockers, as Nils Peterson had educated the Transportation Commission and Planning and Zoning Commission, bike lockers where you could actually close up your bike and lock it inside a container, and lead the way. I know the Transportation Commission had looked at using the odd bits at the ends of parking downtown to put motor scooters and motorcycles in, so they don't take up whole automobile spaces, and more places could be found. It was very interesting to me that, looking at a lot of the business owners do not live in the city limits and perhaps would not use their bicycles to commute as much as people who live, residents of the city. I have a quick question. Bill, what's the percentage of the population that are students, of the residents of Moscow? Do you have a ballpark?
That is what?
Bill? Percentage of the population of Moscow that are students?
Well, I can tell you that I think the on-campus enrollment in the community is a little over 10,000 students, or a little under 11,000 if I recall the latest fall enrollment numbers. And the latest population number we had was 24,392.
And I'm sure the majority of those students own cars, but they probably, I can't state how many own bicycles. However, if there were the kind of secured areas for bicycles, perhaps owners would use them more. I mean, if we can put a cyclone fence around a dumpster, we certainly could make gated bike parking available. I'm speaking last because my heart is in this ordinance, and my heart is in having an ordinance, and I really like the amendments, but I think the city leading the way with central business, I agree with Tim that this needs some work, and I agree with Dan where he says maybe where we should be working on is the people who do step forward and put in bike racks to have standards, the proper standards, because until I actually looked at some of the bicycle facilities videos, I didn't know there was such a thing as a bike locker. I didn't know there was such a thing of ways to secure bicycles. I don't want this to totally die, though. I don't want it to say, oh, let's vote it down and have it go away. I would look to the other members of the council to see what we could do to bring this forward, not let it die, and do something appropriate for the business community and the bicyclists in town, because it's not an exclusive group. They're not exclusive to each other. And I'd like to see something that brings us together as opposed to dividing.
I know, Tom, I'm calling you to comment, but we've heard several mentions of bike inventories and the city providing racks. And I know that you and Philip and others were part of the inventory with the Friendship Square and the placement of racks down there, counting how many bikes were left on, secured to racks during the summer months, apparently abandoned and that sort of thing. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, there are a few things I wanted to speak to.
Please.
So
to me, this ordinance makes a lot of sense. But it's only one small piece of what needs to happen in Moscow. This is only addressing the requirements that we have for parking within zones where we have that authority to require parking. It doesn't go after the university district, it doesn't go after the central business district, but that's because those pieces are already outside of the zoning ordinance where we're doing this work. So this is one piece that we need to think about separately than the other pieces. There is a lot of work that needs to be done in the central business district, and some of that's already started by the city. So there are a bunch of thoughts I'm having. With respect to all of this, yes, one thing that we need to do is more work in the central business district, but I see the consideration of this ordinance as separate from that for good reason, because it's amending a different part of the laws of Moscow, the Code of Moscow. So, with the conversation I've heard tonight, there's a substantial amount of education, I think, that needs to take place among people who are, well, among everybody. Some of that education needs to be among the people who are providing services within the city of Moscow to understand the clientele and how they're using those services. I think that there's been a lot of assumptions made about why people are not using racks or why they may be parking them, at apartment buildings closer to their homes has been the assumption. I think that some people might just want to have their bikes parked undercover, and they can do that parking them on the stairwells. There's a lot. I've had a number of daughters who have lived in apartment buildings in Moscow, and they've been unsatisfied with the bike racks that have been provided for them. It doesn't work. They don't work. There are a lot of businesses in town that have bike racks in Moscow. I don't want to name names, but even new businesses just approved last year providing bike racks that don't meet the standards that we're trying to set forth with this ordinance. Before we go and tell people they can't park bikes in certain locations, we're going to have to change the way we do things in Moscow. For God, I don't know, 25 years, I've been trying to convince one very popular hotel center in Moscow that they need to provide bike racks not next to the thorn bushes. I mean, I don't know how to make it any clearer. Private, leaving it up to people to just make decisions on their own is not going to work unless perhaps maybe this is what we need to do, is a major education program where we're getting bicyclists together with the businesses to say, look, if you want us to shop here, this is what we need to do. If you want us to stay in your apartment complexes, this is what's going to need to happen. But I don't know if people that ride bikes have that kind of political clout or education clout to get people to pay attention. So it seems like the tool of having an ordinance where we're making requirements makes sense to me. Short of that, perhaps the way we handle this particular issue tonight is perhaps we can just simply send it back to the Transportation Commission so that we can at least have some clean form of how it gets handled from here and that it's not just thrown away.
Madam Mayor?
Dan?
I think that Tom and I are agreeing on a point here, but I don't know if it needs to necessarily go to the Transportation Commission other than, I think maybe we created a downtown parking task force when we were talking about changing the timing of the parking downtown and things like that. Perhaps this is the same thing we need to do for this, a bicycle parking task force. So we can set up the standards, set up the bicycle people to talk to the business people. This is what we want to see, so we will frequent your whatever. This is what we
Right,
want
or
to
whatever
see, so
that
we
is,
will
right.
stay in your apartment, at your hotel, whatever it is. I would like to see us put a task force together.
Madam Mayor?
I'm sure we got some volunteers out there that would gladly do it.
Yeah, I'll just put a 2
Madam
cents
Mayor?
worth in. I just
Oh.
wanted to mention, I follow up to Tom. He's, tried 25 years to get the bike parking out of the sticker bushes, and I've been equally unsuccessful by having to lean my bike up against a newspaper machine and tie it and chain it to my husband's bike and hope no one steals it while we're in there, because
Or a flagpole or
there's
whatever.
no bike rack. And the city did try, for those people who may not know, we put in place a matching arrangement, so $100 in the installation of a bike rack, an approved form of bike rack that's been so thought out by our Transportation Commission members and others. So we said, business owners, we will install this. The city will install this. You can put it even on private property, and you get this $100 contribution toward the installation and the city's part in it. We've tried the Artful Bike Rack program as a more colorful kind of incentive for businesses and others, largely unsuccessfully. And we advertise it, we put it on the city's homepage, we have news articles about it. It's, that's the issue, that the free market system has not been successful, and that's why we're having this conversation here tonight. That's why the Planning and Zoning Commission had its protracted meetings about this and a duly noticed public hearing, why the Transportation Commission worked it through so carefully, and our Community Development Department is, I know that Bill has kind of been left out of this a little bit, but we certainly want to acknowledge the work of staff on this. So a lot of thought and a lot of time has been put into it. Sue?
I just wanted to say that I think the task force that was to work on the downtown parking, once they got to the part about the timing and the city council chose not to do that, the rest of its mission got left out. I think bicycle parking was part of that mission, and that task force could be reconvened.
Walter?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we, number one, reject the proposed ordinance. Number two, we create a bike parking task force. And number three, that community development be asked to investigate a method of dictating bike rack styles in our zoning ordinance. Standards. That is my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have Walter's motion and Dan's second. Wayne, I saw your hand up.
Discussion?
Discussion.
Yes.
I'm inviting discussion.
I think everybody's on the same page, pretty much. I think this attempt at creating an ordinance was done out of frustration, but I don't think it's the right direction to go. It's not a matter of telling the business community, we have a problem, you guys fix it. We're telling you how to do it. So, it looks like this ordinance is probably not going to happen. We'll find out when we vote in just a minute. But I will say this, that I would be happy to also work with the task force, with the business community, trying to put something together that's a workable, viable solution. And if this, in fact, gets voted down, don't think for a second that it couldn't come back again if what we try to do next doesn't work.
Sue?
I would like to recognize the Transportation Commission for its years of work on this, and the Planning and Zoning Commission with its part of planning. The best part of planning and zoning is planning, having the vision of how you would like Moscow to look and how you would like it to be to serve all of its citizens. And I think that's what they were doing, and that's what transportation was doing. This reminds me, doing the task force first reminds me of when we were doing a billboard ordinance through planning and zoning, and a task force was put together, a subcommittee was put together, including the chamber members, including business people, and they did that first before bringing the ordinance to the council. And I feel badly for all the hard work that's been put in and to not be able to totally support it now. But I'd rather do it the right way the first time.
Call for the question.
I'm going to put in a comment here. Just clarification on Sue's point about planning and zoning and transportation trying to do the right thing. In fact, their direction came from the city council's vote on the comprehensive plan. That
correct.
was approved, and it was
That's correct.
explicit. You will make these provisions for bicycle parking.
That's right.
Et cetera. So it was called out very clearly. They didn't act autonomously. They acted at
No, that's true.
the body of the city council's direction.
That's true.
Okay.
And then when the comp plan came out, there were too many other issues,
we had
but I
a
don't
call
think
for the
people
question,
noticed
Madam
it.
Mayor.
And I didn't choose to acknowledge it. Yeah. Tom?
I just wanted to say that
I'm not sure that's proper, Madam Mayor. City Attorney?
He's
I
looking it
I
up.
think I have an option to not acknowledge that.
Randy?
Here comes, it depends.
I'd need to have some time to research that. The chair does control the flow of the meeting, but I'm not so sure the chair can ignore a legitimately made motion.
I'm not
What
ignoring
I
the
heard
motion.
was
I
a-
heard a call for the question. But I
Sorry,
didn't
a call for the
necessarily
question,
hear it.
something that had been proposed by someone who's a member of the body. If you want to give me 5 or 10 minutes, I'd be happy to research. You want to take a recess?
I can take a look here, too, perhaps. Let's just see.
While you're looking, why doesn't Tom say?
Why don't we, it won't really
take very long.
Great. Why don't we do that while you're researching?
You want to
that?
retract
You
that?
just don't want me to, I mean, it won't take very long, Walter.
No, let's recess. I think it's a bad precedent to set.
Can we recess for 10?
Not yet.
Does a call for the question have to be voted on? To whether or not call the question?
Yeah, it needs a second,
So,
but it can't be ignored,
okay.
I don't think. But I don't have to vote.
And debatability, let's see what that says.
That's, yeah. Yeah, I guess the call for the question has to be seconded, and if it's not seconded, then it hasn't.
Well, I can do that. What?
Remember, more things got done on the point of information than anything else.
Okay, it's out of order when another has the floor, and I actually had the floor. Must be seconded, and it was not seconded. And so I'm looking at, my copy is 9th edition, page 197.
Kay Keskin was tearing her hair out right now.
Yeah, we are thinking of UK.
Yeah, I lost. I was under 10 o'clock.
How about if I withdraw my call for the question and we just move on with this?
I'd like that, Wayne, thank you. Okay.
This is
We-
ridiculous.
Yeah, okay. So we will take a, can we do it in
Well,
five
no, Tom
minutes?
had something to say.
Tom does have
Let
something to
Tom
say.
talk. Was going to say
Okay, all
two
right.
things.
Tom?
I was just going to speak to the motion itself first and just say that I would support the second two pieces of it, but not an outright rejection of the ordinance. Ordinance. I'd prefer that it just be tabled indefinitely as part of that motion, because I think that there's some merit in having it further discussed by the Transportation Commission.
And then secondly, I wanted to also just address just a couple of comments that Wayne had made about bicycles and how people use bicycles in Moscow. The first comment he said, not comparing them as vehicles, it's already defined in the state code as a vehicle. It's not really up to us to decide it one way or the other. And the state code also lays out the law with how bicycles are to be used within the state. And when they're on roads, they are to observe the same laws as automobiles with 2 exceptions. And those 2 exceptions are defined clearly. So besides that, yes, they have to be operated as vehicles, and those laws are enforceable. So hopefully we're having adequate enforcement. And if we don't have adequate enforcement, then that's a separate issue that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
So those are 2 comments I wanted to make.
Is there further discussion before voting? Okay, Walter, would you restate your motion, please?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. That the proposed ordinance before us be rejected, that a bike parking task force be created, and third, that the Community Development Department be asked to investigate the feasibility of, did you have a better word than dictating, Sue? Dictating.
Standards.
Creating standards for
They
bike rack
actually have them
styles
already.
in Moscow.
Okay. And we had Wayne second on that, correct?
Oh, I did.
Oh, sorry, Dan second. Apologies.
Sorry.
Okay. And hearing no further discussion, we'll start the roll call vote with you, Tim.
Great. Aye.
No.
Aye.
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 Okay, the motion carries. Would the council like to give further direction to this task force that you've just directed be created?
I was like, Wayne offered to chair it.
Not right now, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you all for your testimony.
I would like that the members of the previous parking task force be invited to join the bicycle parking task force and work with, I'm not sure if it's the Transportation Commission or the Planning and Zoning Commission that they should work through first to
Probably
develop a
transportation,
plan.
if they're
I'm-
willing to look at it again, but I don't know that.
Point of clarification,
Sure.
what Sue's talking about.
Please?
I believe you're talking about the mayor or council created downtown parking task force that was made up of city staff, police department personnel. I was on it, but I don't remember whether I was on council at the time or not. And Bill, are you reaching for the mic? Do you remember?
We had downtown business representatives, we had city staff, as well as,
I mean, and wider, but I think those people that were willing to step up and work on that, plus a wider group for the city, entire city,
if
should work with that. And
if I may ask you, just if you had some specifics about what you wish for this task force to do.
That was my
Is it to
question,
try
too.
to
Yeah.
work on a revised ordinance? Is it to try to work on voluntary programs, as has been suggested? I just trying to.
If I may?
Please?
My motion was originally going to be to remand this to Transportation, since we had the Chair of Transportation, and I'm not sure, possibly the Vice Chair of Transportation here, and give them a copy of the minutes of tonight's meeting, because I felt there were a large number of comments, both from the public testimony and the council comments, that they would find underlinable and issues that need to be addressed. I would suggest that might be a way for the task force that we ended up with being initially instructed.
I think this is a good suggestion. I would request that the entirety of all the input provided to the council that city clerk has on file is provided to this task force. So they have all the minutes from the various meetings as well as the written testimony provided us via email, et cetera, and they can see the entire picture.
Is it, and I apologize for belaboring the point, but I'm just wanting to make sure that we understand what the council's desire is. Is it the desire that you would like to see an ordinance come forward at some point in time with the work of this task force that would be similar to what was proposed tonight, that would require bike parking Or would you prefer not to see an ordinance come forward and see it being addressed in some different
Dan,
fashion?
you were-
Because that's kind of, it's a fundamental difference there. And I think what we heard tonight was kind of a fundamental difference of opinion about how this question should be addressed, and to better understand the council's desire, because I don't want to go through the effort and bring an ordinance back to the council at some
Not
point in
that
the
I'm
future.
speaking
No,
for the
Dan,
council,
please.
but what I was thinking is maybe twofold. If they could come up with the standards as suggested, possibly an ordinance, and then strong suggestions. I mean, I know there are parts of city zoning that is not necessarily an ordinance, but this is what we would like to see when you do this, and I would like to see an ordinance come forward. We like Sue said, we do require off-street parking for vehicles. It shouldn't be any different as far as bicycles. It's a vehicle. There should be some sort of off-street parking. But I want to see it coming from both the bicycling community and the business community. So I would like to see an ordinance. I can't speak for the rest of the council.
And if we have that effort and the business community still feels that they would wish it for it to be free
Well,
market.
then we may pass what this is, or we may reject it.
Question for
that
Bill.
could be what happens.
We haven't given you the exact, precise parameters, time frame, items on the list that you may want. With a little bit of a break, have you been able to gel in your mind a way this might be approached by a task force, or to put it to a point where it could come back possibly to one of the two council committees for clarification?
Correct. I think the best course of action would be to bring that back to one of the council committees for further elaboration, discussion about what the intent of the task force would be and what they would cover. I don't think we need to cover that tonight.
Okay.
I just had a quick, before I
Yes,
lose
Sue?
my thought.
Sure,
again.
there you go.
I think there should be a Twitter survey or or bike hangers put on bikes that are chained to trees and things, and with it just saying, please return to City Hall, and say, I'm parking my bike on a tree because there is no good bike rack, security, whatever, and just find out what's going on. And with Twitter or Facebook, we certainly could get opinions from people who park their bikes in their apartments and say, I would park it on a bike rack but something like that.
Okay, Randy?
If I could suggest that perhaps it wouldn't be good to suggest that people chain their bikes to trees. If it causes damage to trees, we do have a regulation that prohibits that. But as I understood it, what you're interested in is trying to gather people together and get more information about it. But when you say that, if you want to tag stuff, if
I would
something's
park my
chained to a
bike.
tree, I think that I would recommend against that. That's city property, that's valuable. So if that's what you're saying, I would recommend that you don't.
Well, we could tag them and say, this is a damage to city property, and I would park my bike in a bike rack if something. Anyway, the way to find out about the bicycle people is, to hear from the bicycle people, is the way we've been doing it isn't working, so
Tim?
Social networking.
Thanks, Mayor Cheney. Bill has suggested that this subject go back to a committee, and it would be my opinion that since we've had a lot of discussion tonight and everybody on the council's had an opinion, my suggestion would be that it go to both committees.
Transportation and P&Z.
No,
Yes, ma'am.
Admin and Public Works Finance.
Oh, I see.
Both.
Yes, okay.
Public Works, Finance, Admin.
Okay, other points from council?
I would concur with that.
Staff okay with that direction so far?
Well, certainly.